Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series premiere of Three Pines, a great series premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So I went into this series kind of expecting it to be differently structured than what it is. Obviously, at the time we recording this, because I forgot it came out last week, there's 4 episodes out, but this show seems to have a 2-episode arc structure. Now, I'm just basing this having only seen the first episode, but seeing that second episode is called Part 2. So part of me wonders, is this a situation where it's like, different points in the investigation are divided up like that, or is it different? Because I thought everything Three Pines related was going to be related to what is the Two Rivers situation. You know, there is a young woman, Blue, Two Rivers, who's missing, and she's been missing for a year, and her community and her family wants her, found. They want the cops to do something about it, but it's like, right, there's so many indigenous women that go missing that kind of end up falling through the cracks, and it's just not a few. Like that number racks up over and over again, and sadly it does seem like, that isn't just something to show it. I think it's to show highlighting something that is a real issue that doesn't get the public reception that it should. I think that's a conversation all in its own right, on a larger scale too, but tangents and all that aside, the fact is, I thought the Blue Two River situation was what was going to bring Armand to Three Pines, but he's actually here for a different case because a woman named Cece is murdered, and she was someone that you could immediately go like, oh, cool. No one liked her because, she was having an affair. She was cruel and mean to her child. It's like, right. Like their daughter has this a momentous moment, and she's in a choir where she's singing, and she is killing it. I believe the actress who plays her daughter, looking at her IMDb, I think it said that she was on America's Got Talent. There's even a picture of her like singing. I'm like, oh yeah. It's like, oh, that's all her, and I'm like, she's got an amazing voice. And I was like, that's like, and that's a sad thing. Her parents are so busy arguing, they missed her solo. This is her moment, and she was killing it. And it sucks. And then, there's also that whole thing with Cece and her mom, which also feels weird to me because like that's my mom's nickname is Cece because it's her initials, So it's just weird saying it's just like anytime the name Cynthia comes up, I'm like, oh, it feels weird. To say, like, because I'm like, it makes me feel like I'm talking about my mom's. So it's like, especially saying Cece, but regardless, the fact is, the cruelty she showed towards not just her daughter, but also her husband, because her daughter accidentally broke like what is kind of like a Christmas tree ornament that is kind of the last of a set that her mom made, but apparently destroyed. She's like, my mom destroyed him on my 10th birthday, and she was laughing when they were taking her away. So I don't know if like she was kind of like not mentally all there or what that was in reference to, but for her it's like, this is kind of like, it's this beautiful thing that it's the last of, and maybe it's like, regardless of whatever her mom's circumstances may have been, and maybe I'm completely misread or misunderstood that story that Cece was telling, but at the very least, it's just, this was the last one, and the moment her daughter accidentally broke it, and her husband was apologetic about it too, she ripped into her husband, Richard, and her daughter, Cree, and was just kind of like, yeah, the biggest mistake was marrying you and having that, and didn't even, like, calling her that like she's an object or something. Like, it's like, Jesus, why do you have to be so cruel? And obviously it wasn't just her family that had issues with her. Apparently everyone in town didn't like her, because I think we could just safely say Cece was kind of a bitch, so, and she got killed super hard. As Armand puts it later on, it's like, oh, she was executed. She basically got the electric chair, because initially it just seems like, oh, maybe it was an accident or something like that. But it's like, yeah, during a curling match, she super got murdered in front of everybody. No one was watching her, but it's like, yeah, she died in front of everybody. And some people were just kind of looked like very like, oh my God, but other people almost like, okay. Oh, kind of ding dong, the witch is dead type of situation. So, but that's where Armand gets called in along with Isabel and Jean Guy. And also another cop was brought in, and that's Agent Yvette, I love her because she's kind of like the fumbling one that's like, it's like, right, she was getting witness statements. She's like, yeah, they were talking about somebody, and she couldn't remember the person's last name. She's like, I probably should have wrote that down. And Jean Guy has had, like, because she's been coming in for police training beforehand. It's like she spilled coffee on me. She ended up shredding something that was like super important and irreplaceable, and apparently let someone bad know where someone was staying. She's just kind of a bumbling train wreck when it comes to this. But yeah, apparently their commanding officer, their captain or lieutenant or whatever, had told her like, oh yeah, Armand's going to be the one that helped finish out your training, because he was upset with Armand because Armand got in the middle of the whole the other cops were rough handling Blue's family while they were like them and the rest of the community were protesting outside, because it's like, right, do something about it. Like, it's been a year, we've asked you to do that, look into this, but you refuse to. And he didn't like what had happened, so he decided to, he took it upon himself to look into this for them. Which they do get some answers for later on, because he had his buddy like look into it, because it's like, right, Blue, she has a daughter named Pearl at home, so they're like, there's no way she would have actually just left. She loved her daughter, she would have never left her behind. Well, she left with her boyfriend Tommy, and then there's the whole thing about Kevin, because Kevin like kind of got his money illegally, but then they were also it was either Kevin or Tommy, one of them got their money illegally, but then Blue's family was just kind of like, oh, really? Like, just because he was selling like cigarettes tax free? It's like, yes, because of the reservation. That obviously reservations have completely different jurisdiction and rules than like a federal state would here in the U.S. And so it's like, right, like, just because it's considered illegal by your standards, it's like, right, we're doing whatever he can to make money, in this country that you guys have taken from us. It's like, yeah. So then there was like, because Armand's buddy had found a photo that was taken 2 weeks ago. But even then I was like, well, it was posted 2 weeks ago. Even I at the beginning was like, yeah, but there's no guarantee that picture's from 2 weeks ago. It could have been posted 2 weeks ago, but like, you'd have to look into like the metadata. I don't know if that's something you could legitimately do, like go into like the code of a picture and see when it was actually taken. You probably need the actual phone itself to be able to tell that, because it would tell you what date and stuff like that, especially if it was like tagged and stuff. I think it would just be an automatic thing, but I don't know if you'd be able to do that from like it being posted on a website. I don't think you'd be able to, but, smarter person might be able to figure that out regardless. But that's why I was immediately kind of like, yeah, that could be suspicious. And then also, I don't know if it's Blue's sister is the one that took out the jacket being like, no, look at this. The jacket she supposedly was wearing 2 weeks ago when that picture was taken, why is it here at home? Even she's been going for a year. So they're still looking at it like, right, if she was still out there and okay, she would call home. And the fact that she hasn't must mean something happened. So it's like, right, there's no possibility she ran away or anything like that. So it definitely does seem suspicious. And it like might be whoever is connected all this is covering their trail to make it seem like, well, because what happened is like basically, Kevin, his truck, because Tommy and Blue, the last time they were seen a year ago, was getting in Kevin's truck, and Kevin's truck was seen by like a surveillance camera or something like that 2 weeks ago, and they put that out with conjunction with this photo that was uploaded, like posted 2 weeks ago. But it's like that once again, it's that those don't necessarily equate. So all the while that's happening while Armand and the others are investigating, and we learned some interesting stuff about Isabel. She was adopted, so she doesn't really know her people, because her and B had that conversation. And B was a little cagey when the inspector was like, when Armand was like, oh, like, it's just interesting, like, Cece's name and this place that they're kind of at right now, where it's kind of like their conference room right now. And she's like, oh, like, this place has been here for 20 years. Cece had only been here like a little while, so it's just pure coincidence. You could feel like she was kind of dancing around that subject. It's like, okay, something's definitely like off and shady about that. But going back to it, like, everyone had a motive for disliking her. One of the people they interviewed in this episode, what's her name? Patricia. I don't remember the character's name, but the actress's name is Patricia Somerset. And I was like, she looked familiar to me, and I saw like in her IMDb, it's like The Legend of Zelda. I was like, wait, was she Zelda or something? It's like, yeah. Actually, I didn't even think about it at the time, but it's like, oh yeah, because it's also like, right, you were the first English voice for Zelda, which is pretty dope. But I was like, why does she seem so familiar? And look at one of her pictures, I was like, oh yeah, she was on Off Topic once. Because I remember, obviously, Michael Jones is like a big Zelda fan, so there's that. But I remember Alfredo was like, oh my god, this is Ash from in Rainbow Six Siege, and I was just like, oh, but just one of those things that like casting things, I just kind of like immediately jumped out at me when I was looking. I was like, man, she looks so familiar, and I couldn't place it, and that's what that was about. Regardless, tangents and all that aside. The point is, she ended up pissing off a lot of people, and it seems like, yeah, like everyone kind of had motive for like, I mean, whether you go as far as murdering her, because everything she's done is very like asshole-ish, but I don't think it's enough to be murdered for. But I did love that, obviously he made a whole statement and point of it, where he, at the end, Armand is putting everyone's photos from witness to, suspect, and you know, you had agent Yvette be like, why'd you do that? And it's like, right, because she wronged all of them in some shape or form. And he references Frankenstein. It's like, right, the village celebrated when they killed the monster, when the monster died, but it's like the monster didn't just die, the entire village worked together to kill that monster. And lo and behold, he's kind of suggesting like, what if the entire town was in on it? You're like, ooh, because when you, I mean, it could be a conjoined thing of like, yo, this woman is the worst. We can all kind of be each other's alibis, and if, you know, couldn't potentially be the perfect murder if they all work together to make it happen. You know, that could be a possibility, because it seems like everyone hated her. And even then, like, all of the suspects are a part of the same like book club and everything, and it's like, that's weird. I mean, you're not making yourself seem any less guilty when Ruth is kind of like saying stuff like, hey, Three Pines is a very welcoming place, but if you aren't here, this place will chase you out or something like that. I'm like, yeah, cool. Say all the stuff that's going to make you look like the most like a suspect, and then they're all kind of like, well, you told him, and then they're all kind of laughing afterwards. It's like, I mean, I get it, you don't really care about Cece and stuff like that, but still, like, if someone in your town got murdered and you don't seem too broken up about it, I guess it's like, right, not caring that she was murdered because she was a kind of a dick. I mean, there's no crime in that, but it just makes you look and seem suspicious as hell. And I think you would want to seem the least amount of suspicious when a murder mystery is happening, you know, when a murder mystery is afoot type of situation. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I do find it fascinating that, well, because Yvette's from outside of town too, so she was kind of brought in just like Isabel, Armand, and Jean-Guy. So it's like, I guess there's like no like local full-blown Three Pine locals looking into this situation. And then at the end we saw like everyone's kind of from burning her books, taking down the painting she's got in that shop, the lady who made a painting like slicing through it. Well, it looked like it was more so her painting that was copied and made into, well, because it was a different photo than the one for Cece. So part of me wonders, and that what's her name, Clara? I think what might have happened, because I think that painting might have been a self-portrait of herself, and that Cece maybe just took it and like had her own image used, because it was like, it's the same style, but the picture was different. Because she kept saying like, right, she drew the picture from Cece's a photo that Cece gave her, because it's like, right, she didn't want to sit still. She wasn't patient enough to sit still with it. So this episode also brought up, there was this beautiful line from Armand when he was talking to Creed. That he's like, right, I know what it's like to lose your mom. He's like, I was about your age, a little younger than you when I lost my mom and my dad. And it's like, he said this line where he was like, basically, you will survive it. I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, everything is going to be okay. Like, you know, it's going to, that feeling is going to fade away. It's like, no, but you will you will survive it. You will find a way to kind of live with it. And he said that you might feel like that grief, it might feel like fear, but he was saying grief is basically love with just nowhere to go, which I was like, oh, that's beautiful. That's such a beautiful and elegant way to put that. I was like, oh, it very much reminds me of the WandaVision line. Now, I always feel like I get it backwards in my head, but I think it's like, what is grief if not love persevering? I always can never remember if I flip, if love and grief need to be flipped in that. But regardless, despite, even if, regardless of if I butchered a quote, you hopefully know what I'm talking about. So it's almost like a neat parallel in that regard. But I love that notion. It's like, right, grief is just like, right, you have this love for someone that you're not able to give that love to them anymore because they're gone. And I think that's so, timing is just really interesting. And I had to dream about my grandfather, like, just like last night. And it was weird. I mean, he passed away about 9 years ago, and so it kind of threw me for a loop to kind of dream about him after all this time and stuff like that. I just thought that was interesting. Unintentional segue. We do have this situation where Armand is seeing, I believe it's a blue jay, because like jay is supposed to be like like a blue jay, like the bird. It's supposed to be like a nickname that they gave Blue. And so one of the family members gave him, like, I think a blue jay's feather, and he saw it there where Cece was murdered. Specifically, I think it landed specifically on the chair that Cece was sitting at. And then later on, he hits it and he kind of breathes on it, because I guess that was his way of, like, right, he was trying to breathe. I guess, like, right, you don't want to get too close to a bird when you're trying to maybe resuscitate it, like trying to give it CPR to some extent, because I'm like, I guess, like, right, you would probably, like, it would explode if you directly breathed into it and everything, or you probably don't want to put your mouth directly on a bird's mouth. But it got up and flew away, but it seems like that was potentially still part of the dream, because he turned around and Blue was there. So there's something significant there, because he saw it at first at the crime scene and he turned and it was gone. So I don't know if that was just in his head. It just, because when he hit the bird, I was like, that's ominous. That's kind of a bad omen. But also it flying away seems like maybe on some level, on some spiritual level, maybe Blue is trying to speak to you in some regard. So I thought that was really interesting. What I also thought was interesting too, the chair that Cece was sitting in, it was actually supposed to be saved for someone else, but Cece moved aside. They must have did that whoever the killer is, they had to done that on purpose, because they knew, like, oh, Cece, once again, is so much of a dirt that she's going to end up moving that just for the purposes of, like, right, they knew that that'd be the most inviting thing. That's how you guarantee she sits there. She could have sat anywhere, because her family, her husband and daughter weren't sitting there, not unless they were supposed to. But I'm pretty sure, I don't remember who was supposed to sit there, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't her. It was assigned, definitely assigned to someone else, and she was just kind of like, oh, I'm gonna take this chair. So I don't know who the other two chairs were for. It might have been people from the competition or something like that, the curling or whatever. But it's like, so it seemed like, regardless of it, I don't think, because it could easily lend itself to be like, oh, maybe she was never the intended target. But I'm like, I think she was. I think they just set that up because they knew she's so much of a dick, because she'll like, oh, I'm gonna take this spot just because it's reserved for someone else, just to be spiteful, because she seemed like she could be a mean, spiteful person. I did think it was interesting that the guy she's having the affair with, the photographer, Saul, that he seemed reluctant to hand over his photos, and it's like, yeah, just make sure you don't leave town. Because at first he was trying to hide the fact is they were having an affair, because you don't want to admit it, because, right, kind of makes you seem like a suspect. But it's like, I don't think you did it because you loved her too much to actually do it. And I think maybe Richard knew on, so either he knew, or because you could tell, like, at the curling game when they were touching and stuff, like, he had an inkling, but it could just be like he legitimately didn't know, or maybe he didn't know, and maybe Cree knew. There was just something there. And once again, she was kind of cruel to them anyway, so Richard probably has his own motives as well for wanting her dead. So it's hard to say. And also, like, it sucks too, because, like, the place that she's staying at, I forgot the name Isabel called it, but it's basically a school where indigenous children were taken. And it's like, yeah, why would you, I mean, I guess, like, I would feel like, because especially Ruth said, like, oh yeah, that house had been empty for so long until Cece bought it. And I'm like, oh, I guess, like, people would have probably told you when you buying that house, like, giving you the history of that house. And maybe you purposely still like, oh, it's like, well, I think it's one of those schools where, like, indigenous children were kind of taken from their homes and kind of forced to go there. It's that whole kind of, like, trying to Americanize them a little bit, you know. I know more recently, like, the show Dark Winds kind of touched on that. But I mean, once again, just kind of one of those ugly realities of, well, reality. But I'm really interested to see where the next episode ends up taking us. Like I said, based on like the episode titles, like this was part 1 and that's part 2. And I think episode 3 and 4 are a part 1 and part 2 to each other. So that's why I was wondering, like, are these going to be individual cases, or are they very specific sections of the overarching, or the arc? Because I would assume like this is going to be about Cece's murder, and then like 3 and 4 are going to be about something else, and the Two Rivers situation is going to be an overarching story. I'm basing it out on just like having seen the titles of the episodes, not even have read the descriptions or anything. But I'm excited to see where the next episode takes us with all of this as we continue these 2 investigations and see where everything ends up taking us. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.